Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everybody. Hello, occupiers out there. We got a special guest on today's show. Everybody knows about the George Zimmerman trial. Mr. Zimmerman was found not guilty of second-degree murder in Sanford, Florida. One of his most ardent supporters out there was a gentleman by the name of Frank Taaffe. And let me tell you, folks, it is not easy, not at all easy, to do what Frank Taaffe did. He basically took on the HLN lynch mob. And let me tell you, for those who don't know, this is not a simple task, folks. You're up against Nancy Grace. You're up against Jane Velez Mitchell, Vinnie Politan. You're up against them all. And this is, for this, Occupy commends Frank. And we're lucky enough to have him here on the show. And we're going to talk to him a little bit. And you are free to call in and perhaps pose your own questions. So, with that said, the call-in number, if anybody would like to, is 718-664-6179. I am here with co-host Lisa and Frank Taaffe. Welcome, Frank.
Well, thanks, guys, for having me. And, fire away, no pun intended.
Yeah, there's a lot to think about in that one. How are you doing, Frank, first of all?
I'm doing great. I just finished my tour with HLN in New York and Atlanta, and just in a down mode right now, and chilling out, enjoying the not guilty verdict. Still on that cloud nine with that, and it's a good feeling that I have inside to know what I did was not in vain, and. I'm feeling good today. Really feeling good. Thank you.
Yeah. No easy task, Frank. The trial obviously lasted just slightly under a month, but you were a lot, more busy than that. You spent. When did you really start? When did HLN really start? Coming at you with these interviews.
Well, it was in March of last year, and I did a quick snippet on the local TV station, and then next thing you know, they were busting down my door. And I'd gone on Nancy Grace and Jane and Dr. Drew starting in March of last year, right after the shooting. And it's just been, it was ongoing from there. And then it, died down a little bit, and then it kicked right back up again when the trial started.
Yeah, Frank, you and I have talked. You actually said something that was really interesting, and I find it to be, in my opinion, quite prescient and quite true. It's almost, HLN, we all know, everybody who follows Occupy knows, they're a show based on sensationalism. They convict the accused prior to even trial beginning. And
well, Mark Yergo said it was HLN stood for the Hysterical Ladies Network. I don't know if you heard that.
That's a good pseudonym.
I might add, friend of Occupy, Mark Geragos, that is. Yeah. And, well, Frank, back to my thought, though, you had mentioned to me once that, and I completely agree with you, Lisa, I think you'll concur, too, that HLN needs you more than you need them.
Yeah, they do, because it was so slanted, and I really enjoyed going up on all those little pundits, in their little boxes. I really couldn't see because I was at a remote location, satellite location, so I really couldn't see their faces, other than the fact that when I heard some pure BS started to spew out of their mouth, that I knew it was my time to interject, and boy, did I interject.
Oh, you did. You definitely did. But, after the Jodi Arias trial, HLN, they were boring again. And once you came on, that really probably boosted their ratings.
Well, I looked at their numbers, and they've gone through, since then, they've gone through the floorboard. And their format needs help. It's like, to me right now, watching it, they're beating up some really insignificant issues on HLN. And does HLN need me? Hell yeah, they do. Are you kidding me? I'm the only one that got on there and balanced that seesaw out. And
I can tell you.
Go ahead.
I can tell you, HLN is not my favorite channel, but I actually DVR'd it just so I could watch you go back at them. I really enjoyed it.
Well, I appreciate it, and I did. They did give me my start in my quest to see that justice prevailed for my friend George. And I got to share this with you. People out there used to say, "Well, how much is he making off this?" And what's in it for you? The only thing that was in it for me was to see that a friend and neighbor was not going to be maliciously prosecuted by the state of Florida. And this was a race-baiting, race-hustling event to stir up membership for the NAACP, for Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, who I have not seen them around here, even during the verdict watch. And, that's all this was an opportunity. They were opportunistic. They were race-baiting. They were race hustlers, talking their crapola, and I use that term very lightly. If you know what I'm talking about, I promise I'd be very frank with you.
It's a four-letter word that begins with S. Yeah.
It smells like it and looks like it. Good thing you don't want to taste it. So anyway, it precipitated with them, and here was an event that was clearly self-defense. The chief of police, Bill Lee, who was admonished for his belief that in his 30 years of law enforcement, this gentleman, this kind person, this kind neighbor, this altruistic man, George Zimmerman, who gave of himself and never expected anything in return, was being maliciously, and at times it could have turned very violent against him. And you know what? I'm just proud today to say that I stood up for him. And, I hope that everybody would take the opportunity that's listening right now, that if you know somebody, reach out to them and stand up for them, because we've all had situations in our life where we were completely innocent of something, even going back to our parents, and had a big brother just step in and just say, "No, you got this all wrong."
Well, what was always apparent to me, if I can just say one thing, what was always apparent to me is George called the police. He absolutely called the police. It wasn't like he went out to go hunt someone down and kill them like it was made out to be. He called the police. He was on the phone with the operator. I mean, someone who's going to go out and do something wrong does not call law enforcement before they do it.
No, they had this spin, and chief of police, 11 police officers, the state attorney, all concurred that it was self-defense. And it wasn't, and if you didn't know this, your listeners need to know that it wasn't until Ben Crump was contacted by Ryan Jewelson. Remember these names. Jewelson had a PR firm here in Orlando. And he got with Crump, actually it was Natalie Jackson, another one of the spinsters, as I like to call them. One of the
Familiar
spinsters
with both.
Got out there, and they wrote a letter to the Department of Justice, attention Eric Holder. And in it, they stated that there was malfeasance and misconduct on behalf of the Sanford Police Department, that on the night of the shooting, that George's dad had somehow teleported himself off the spaceship Star Trek into the police station, and because of what his past experience was as a magistrate up in Virginia, that he was able to tell them not to charge his son. And that was in the letter that Crump wrote to the Department of Justice, totally just, fabricating everything. And that's when when this volcano, when the lava started pouring over the top.
Yeah, Frank, actually, speaking of Mr. Crump and Natalie Jackson, Occupy has reported on both of the two. I'm reading the tea leaves here. I think this is a pretty obvious answer, but I'd like to hear your opinion anyways. For those who did follow the George Zimmerman case, we know that he wasn't arrested immediately after the death of Trayvon Martin. There were, when you said state attorney, Frank, I'm sure you're referring to Angela Corey?
No, Norman Wolfinger. Norman Wolfinger was the 18th Judicial District. He was the state attorney.
So leads me to my question, Frank, is, and I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Do you think that, since, originally, like you intimated, there was no probable cause, keyword probable cause, to make an arrest, do you think that Crump and Natalie Jackson, and the Al Sharptons of the world fired up the race machine? Do you think race played a part in this arrest and the charge?
Oh, totally. If it was a black-on-black crime, this would never come to pass. But because they saw the opportunity that, once again, you had the police involved, you had a white Hispanic or Hispanic white, involved shooting a black boy. And what was portrayed of Trayvon was this innocent, little angelic photo of him in his little football outfit, or how demure he was. And, how could this ogre or this monster go out and shoot some little black boy on his way back from the 7-Eleven with a can of tea and Skittles. All that boy had was a can of iced tea and some Skittles, Mr. Crump. And, that's what took off. And they really started to ramp this thing up into the stratosphere, man.
Yeah, and Frank, I'm sure you might know this. If not, you can read our article on the Occupy website. There's ample evidence to suggest that it wasn't just Skittles and iced tea. It was a southern drink that's popular in the hip hop community down south. Known as purple drink or lean.
It's also known as poor man's ecstasy.
Right, which combined with codeine or Robitussin, and let's all I'm gonna speak for Frank. I think I can do this, and Lisa here. Nobody here is celebrating the fact that a young man lost his life.
No way.
Nobody's happy. Nobody's happy about that.
I think you guys know my story. I lost 2 children in the last 5 years. One was tragically killed in a car accident. I'm coming up on his year anniversary, and I lost another 21-year-old son in September of 2008. So I'm not gloating over the fact that, a young man lost his life. Not at all. But,
of course.
I'm so sorry you lost your son.
It's a travesty of justice, the way that they were able to harangue a judicial system and go after George. Because, if it wasn't a black boy, if it was black-on-black crime, we would never hear about it. It's going on in Chicago all day, every day, across this country, all day, every day. But they singled this event out for their own agenda, the black agenda, to ramp up their own personal coffers, man. Call it what it is.
Do you think part of it was, obviously, I'm a mother. I can relate to, how that must I can't relate to how that must feel to lose a kid. Do you think because someone lost a child, they took the emotional route and then turned it into race because that was the only way they could get around it?
I think it was a combination. They were drawing on the emotions. A, it was a child, and B, that it was a young black boy. And
if I can interject here, Frank, I don't think you can't overstate the importance here and the weight, the overall weight of the media lobby.
Jason,
and who has?
Let me go back to this parenting thing. First of all, let's look at that night, okay? If your son, let's first face the reality. Trayvon was up here on school suspension, okay? 3 times one time they found jewelry, women's jewelry, a burglary tool, marijuana residue, a crack pipe, graffiti. So he wasn't up here on a class trip, okay? Let's remember that first and foremost, okay? He was up here suspended from school because it wasn't because he was, an academic standard, all right? He was up here on suspension for his transgressions in the Miami school system. Now, that night, Tracy, his story was convoluted too. I know personally as a parent, if, first of all, Sabrina says how she loved his son. Well, why'd you kick him out, Sabrina? Why'd you go send him to his daddy's house?
That's Sabrina Fulton, for anybody who doesn't know.
Sabrina, why did you kick him out? You loved him so much. Why would you send him 200 miles away to stay at his daddy's house? Question number one. Question number two. Question number two, you got to ask yourself, or your listeners need to ask, if I was a parent and my son was a delinquent, would I, when I came home, check on him? And the rooms here where I live. I still live here at the retreat, and the rooms are right next to each other. They lived in a 2-bedroom house. Wouldn't you just peek in and say, hey, let me go check on my boy? He woke up the next day and he didn't even know where his son was. I'm just saying, as a dad who has lost 2 children, and, you know, I would at least, at the minimum, check on my boy. I don't know about you all, but that's what I do. And, you know, you're a parent, Lisa. You can understand.
Yes, you want to know where your child is at all times. You want to know they're safe. You want to know what they're up to. It's just instinct.
Right, but, you know, it was due to bad parenting. Bad parenting.
And if you don't discipline your child...
Trayvon was neglected. He was neglected. He was misguided and neglected. The 17-year-old boy needs his dad, and, you know, Tracy, I believe he's suffering. He truly felt the loss of his child.
Yes, and like I said, I can't imagine.
You can see it in his dad's eyes. I've seen it. I've had that look. I know that look. I can identify it. You know, this is my personal life experience. You know, people say, I can't imagine what it's like to lose a child. You can't. You're like stuck in a tomb, man, and someone threw the lid on and you can't see sunshine for a long time. I'm not going to debate, but, you know, I just want to move this along, but, you know, I just want your listeners to know I have empathy for the dad and the mom, well, Sabrina to a degree, but more so for Tracy.
Yes, it is a tragedy. And like, we are not, again, we are no way celebrating that someone died. We are talking about due process. We are talking about the system.
We're talking about the facts in this case. The facts are this, that Trayvon was not up here on a class trip. He was on suspension for school due to his delinquent behaviors. And the consequences
we do have the text messages, too. The text messages kind of speak of volumes, you know.
Which, Lisa, great, they weren't even allowed in the court. O'Mara didn't even have to go there. This case was won the minute the prosecution rested. I was a witness for the defense and for the state. I was up to both of them. But you know what? My story, they didn't need me because the state indicated that I was listed as a hostile witness. I wasn't going to give them anything. Are you kidding me?
Actually, yeah.
I stood my ground again. 3-hour deposition, man. 3 hours they had me in there talking about the FBI report. You know, I was also interviewed by the FBI twice, not once but twice, into the fact that George was a racist. And they came, and they came back and said, the man's not a racist. Okay, now, you know, they're trying to go with this hoodie. He was in, let's not forget, in the police video and that George said, the first place he sees Trayvon is at my house, right up in my house. And 3 weeks prior to that, on one of his 911 calls that he made to Sanford that was in the state's exhibit, I think it's 172, he stemmed a burglary in progress. There was a young black male sitting in my chair smoking a cigarette right up front looking in my open window. And on that night, he helped me stop a burglary in progress. And you know how I know? Because that individual was identified as Emmanuel Burgess, who's now serving 5 years in prison for burglarizing 7 homes in our community.
Wow.
So George actually was really just looking out for the neighborhood. That was his all the time. He's always looking out for the neighborhood.
Well, yeah, Lisa. There were a rash of burglaries in that Sanford community.
We had 7. We had 7 in 11 months.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Olivia, who went on the stand, was actually burglarized during the day. It was a daytime burglary invasion, home invasion. And George went out.
How many neighborhood watchdogs were there? Like, aside from George, were there any other people that did the same job as George in your community?
I did. I was here. I've been a long-standing resident here. I moved here in 2006, and there used to be a breach in the back of my house, which is now, after the HOA paid $1 million plus to the Crumpsters and the scheme team, because they wanted to settle out of court. They didn't want to take it forward. They got $1 million plus.
There you go.
There was an open breach in the back. First of all, the moniker gated community was inaccurate. There was a open space in the back of my house that Trayvon and other black males and other criminals would go in and out of this complex. And it wasn't until the HOA paid out their $1 million that they put up this $2,000 fence. And even the FBI, when they came out here and they inspected my property, I asked them, I said, don't you think a fence would be great? The FBI agent said unequivocally, yeah, a fence would be great. You think?
Yeah. Frank, I digress here a little. I want to digress here a little bit, and let's go back in time here and tell me what it was like. Walk us through this. What it was like for George being out on bail and under home arrest. Went out again. Everybody knows about there. There was a $10,000 hit on Mr. Zimmerman from the new Black Panther Party. And Frank, tell us.
Yeah, they were marching. Jason, they were marching outside of my gate here in front of our complex early on.
Well, we know George gained a lot of weight, pre-trial. Was he depressed? Tell us what life was like for him prior to trial.
Well, his brother and I are good friends, and he shared with me that it was because of his, he couldn't go out in public. He was on home confinement, and I would imagine I'd be depressed too if I was facing 30 years to life, and all I did was I was on my way to Target to buy my wife and I some food for the week, and here it is again. I look over to the left, and I see this young black male looking in my windows, and he's like, it's just like Yogi Berra says, deja vu all over again. It's Here it is again, and the scenario is that he saw Trayvon in the exact same spot where he saw Burgess 3 weeks prior, so it was still fresh in his mind. And all he did was, being a neighborhood watch person, he was just being the eyes and ears for the Sanford PD. He didn't confront Trayvon. He never confronted him. The first encounter he has with Trayvon is when he's looking at him, and Trayvon was trying to size him up. Like, who is this guy? And think about the paranoia that he was creating in his own mind from being on lean or withdrawal, which they found marijuana in his system, the THC level. That was never brought into evidence.
Right.
That's Trayvon. He says to the police officer, he says, or the dispatch, and I want to say that the dispatch was not law enforcement. He was a civilian working in the 911 center, and he just rolls through everything step by step. Hey, I'll meet you back at the mailboxes. I'll meet you back at the truck. Hey, where you at? He says, I don't want to give out my address because I can't see him. It's dark. I can't see him. It just portended itself to, if I say I can't see somebody or I'll meet you guys, why would you shoot somebody and knowing the cops are coming?
Exactly. That has always
really?
been the one thing that I always couldn't say. He is guilty because he called the police, and that has always stuck in my head, that someone who's going to do a crime doesn't call.
Do we do that? Do we go, okay, you know what, I'm going to shoot this dude, claim self-defense, the cops are coming. Okay, cool, I got this. He didn't even know who Trayvon was. He had no hate towards Trayvon. There was no malice or spite or depravity of mind. He didn't know Trayvon.
Right.
All he knew is that Trayvon was punched him, threw him to the ground, smashed his head in the concrete, and guess what? We as human beings, we have a thing, it's instinctive. It's called survival of self.
First law of nature.
Exactly.
Self-preservation.
Now, one thing that I always think on the 911, people always say on the media, he was told to stop following him. Now, what I heard was, we don't need you to do that. But then they go and ask him for an address. So that's giving kind of mixed signals, in my opinion, because you're saying we don't need you to do that, but then you're now asking to look for an address.
He was already at the vehicle. He was already out of the vehicle. And that's when they said, are you following him? And he said, yes. He said, we don't need you to do that. He said, where do you want to meet us? He said, in that little sector of our complex, it's extremely dark. You can't see addresses. So the only one that he was familiar with was to go walk through to where the light was so he could see an address and tell the dispatch where he was. And on his way back to his vehicle is when Trayvon confronted him and said that, hey, you got a problem? He says, no, you got one now. Boom. And if you listen to that other freak of nature, Rachel Gentile, which I just went, wow, really? She discloses the fact in her interviews that Trayvon did go back to whoop that ass.
Whoop that cracker's ass, yeah.
And another thing about Rachel, and Shelley Zimmerman has a perjury trial coming up at the end of this month. And, the state went after her for perjury in a criminal proceeding. What about Rachel Gentile, who lied under oath not once but twice? Twice she lied under oath. This is the same oath that Shelley took on the stand, but yet no charges have been brought against Rachel Gentile in a criminal proceeding. Why?
I have a question about that. You know what? On HLN, I watched you call her the name Precious, okay? I knew you did not know whatever that movie was they were saying that it was about.
Yeah,
I could tell you were not. That was not a comment you made about the movie. That you were just saying you were being sarcastic that she was precious and being sarcastic.
It's a Southern
Am I
term.
correct?
It's a term we use in the South. That's precious, or you're so precious. It's just a Southern term that I picked up that we use down here. That some would say, well, ain't that precious? Okay.
When Jenny Hutt attacked you for that, I knew by the way your facial expression was that you had no idea what she was talking about, relating her to any movie.
I had no idea at that time. And then they immediately
I could absolutely tell.
Somebody in that control room must have already had that, because they showed a picture of Gabby, whatever her name is, Signoret or something like that. They immediately put that up in the box.
Yeah, and I don't know if you knew this, Frank, but Rachel Gentile had also had her Twitter account scrubbed. Now, what that means is that she went back.
Listen, I knew about her. Jason, I knew about her a year ago. Okay, before she had all her on her Facebook, and I knew she was lying because on the day she told a couple of friends on her Facebook account that she was out having her hair did the day of the funeral. She was out having her hair did. Okay.
Yeah.
And,
what was she talking about that she had other people talking for her?
What
was that about?
I
think what Lisa's asking is
she would self-incriminate. She would self-incriminate herself. She's the one that that pushed Trayvon into going and go back and he was a cracker. He might be a racist, and that's why he still had his earbuds on, because he wanted her to hear the ass whipping he was going to put on that cracker.
Yeah, and I think what Lisa was getting at was there was controversy over some people thought during her testimony she had such trouble reading her own letter that some people thought it was somebody else's writing, although there's nothing really to corroborate that.
It was contrived. It was all contrived.
Frank, if we can step aside here and let's focus on how the media treated you. And let me ask you first. I have my opinion on this, but I'd like to get yours. Do you feel that the media wrongfully and perhaps purposely attempted to portray you as a racist?
Absolutely. I speak from the heart. Every time you saw me on TV, it was genuine. It wasn't artificial. I was speaking from the heart. And when you speak from the heart, okay, I should have maybe reserved a few comments, but I'm not going to make any excuses for it. I was speaking from the heart, the way I really, truly felt. And
do you think the media lobby, and in particular, HLN, which has basically, a virtual monopoly over the quote-unquote high crimes market, they cover trials day, night, day, evening, and all night, whereas other real media outlets, have a 3-minute segment here and there. But do you feel that HLN did this, for their own personal gain? They portrayed you as a racist and juxtaposed you next to Miss Ellie, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, Frank, you can help me out here, but I want to say Shahrazad Ali. Do you
Shahrazad
feel
Ali.
The female
do you
Louis
feel?
Farrakhan. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't think anybody would debate that Miss Ali definitely has some racial issues. But do you feel they tried to play you up as perhaps the Caucasian Miss Ali per se
Yeah, but
for their own
she's
gain?
nothing. Sure, absolutely. I mean, it's all about the ratings. The ratings paid the bills, and it's amazing they gave her forum to sit, in 10-minute rants, and the minute I tried to speak for the rest of us, meaning those that are not African Americans, I was quashed. I was suppressed, and it's like, this is total crap, man. And I've vented a couple of times that if you're going to have me on your show, please allow me the opportunity to speak. I don't have to, instead of this, yelling, free for all. Let's make this a dialogue, not a free for all.
Have you ever spoken to Shahrazad, aka Miss Ali, Shahrazad Ali, off the camera?
No. I have no
idea. I think Miss Ali brings us back, 100 or more years in time. I really do. I feel like, the world gets to a certain point where racial stuff is getting better, and then you hear someone like her, and it brings us back very far.
I was wondering if I was watching a rerun of Roots. I was looking for Chicken George and the Fiddler there for a couple minutes. I thought they were going to make an appearance.
Well, yeah, and I remember Miss Ali quoting saying she believes that races cannot coexist, that they must separate. So when Lisa says that, setting us back, yeah, it sounds like Miss Ali was trying to send us back to days of segregation.
Well,
yes, she has it in her head that, everyone that's white is against black, and, I am white. I do not see color. I see a person. I see a human. There are a lot of people that just see people as humans, not a color, not a race. And I think she only wants, she seems to only think that white people can be racist.
No, not at all. And I even stated that on one of the shows. Can a white person be only racist? I think the term cracker is just as derogatory as if when we use that N-word. And I want to bring up a point. When did we become a country of hyphens? Italian-American, African-American, Chinese-American. I thought we were all Americans.
Well, yeah, for that matter, I could be a Polish American minority, and
yeah, but you're still. The bottom line is that you're American. Why do we become a country of hyphens? I'm a African American. I'm a Chinese American. Japanese. You know what? You're of that descent. You were born here in the United States. You are an American.
Yeah, black, white, yellow, purple. It shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter.
And I grew up. Let me bring back I grew up in the '60s. I saw Robert F. Kennedy. I saw speeches by Martin Luther King, and I really saw at that time that the African Americans and other minority groups were being suppressed. But we went out and we changed the laws. We gave them affirmative action so that they can start going to good schools. They can start, promoted in jobs. But that is a big bust. Affirmative action is the white man's slavery. We've endured that. I personally myself have been affected by affirmative action. I worked for two Southern companies, Delta Airlines and Bell South. I saw, based on the color of on the diligence of your work, people get promoted that were unqualified because they had to fill quotas.
Yeah, I've always found that ridiculous. Even on civil service tests, if you're a minority, you get extra points. I've never understood that. Everyone should have to get the same score, the same points, the same everything. It should be
they're
equal.
Screaming for equality. They're screaming for equality, Lisa and Jason, but yet we've given this to them. We went out, we changed the laws for them, and yet today they're still screaming that it's unjust.
I think you bring up a good point, Frank. With the hyphens, this American, that this African American, Caucasian American. Hey, maybe someday. I think that's a great point, Frank, and maybe you can be a pioneer and lead us, progress us forward in the area of race relations, because I think those are prescient
if you
remarks.
like what I have to say, go to my fan page, guys. Frank Taaffe, public figure, and I do have aspirations. I mean, as far as political, I'm not going to announce any candidacy today, but I've been approached by several groups.
Well, let me ask you this, Frank. Well, when you do make a decision, will you let Occupy know?
Absolutely.
We'd love that.
I got to share this with you. When I was out there on an island, Survivor Island, it was just George and I against the rest of America and the world, and I was the only voice that was heard that, oh, he's a racist, oh, he's this, he's that, he don't know what the F he's talking about. Well, if I always stuck to the facts and the evidence in the case and knowing who that person was, that's all I needed, man. I took on the world, and I took on that pro-Trayvon media, and I was excoriated. And you know what? None of them have come forward to even ask me, well, how's Frank Taaffe doing today, other than you guys? How did the verdict? I went on HLN. Let's go back to HLN, and what's it all about. 2 days after the verdict was read, I went on Nancy Grace, and there was a host named Sunny Hostile. And all she wanted to talk about is I made a prediction on the night of the verdict that it was 5-1, and there was one holdout for manslaughter. Well, that sent waves, out there, and I was asked by the sheriff if, I would just cessate the rest of the night with HLN, and if I would just leave. He just wanted me out of sight because he didn't want any mistrial. They didn't want any notion of a mistrial. Well, I go on her show Tuesday night. I haven't made an appearance anywhere or talked to anybody, and the first thing she wanted to bring up was, oh, I heard you, Frank and I, we did meet, and you were asked to leave the premise of the courthouse. You want to explain that? And I went on to tell her it was just speculation, and, that was it. But yet that's the only focus she wanted it because she was so distraught over the verdict.
I actually watched that segment, and I couldn't believe what the media made. Like you had some type of in with the jurors and knew something more. I mean, that's just absurd to me.
Well, they're still spinning in their chairs, man. I still got them spinning. Hey, it is what it is. If you plant corn, you get corn.
Now, I have a question, just a hypothetical. How would you feel if, hypothetically, he did get manslaughter or something after going out and speaking out and everything? Would you still stand by? Would you still go on HLN and support? How would you handle that?
I would have been there for him till the absolute end. I stood by my conviction that he was innocent and it was self-defense, and there would have been opportunities for appeals had that come down. But we got to remember the jurors separated their hearts from the law. And if we look at the law states if you reasonably feel that you're in imminent danger of losing your life, the use of deadly force is justified. And in that case, how many pounds to your head do you need before you are rendered unconscious and you have no means of defense?
Right, and there is an ongoing dialogue, and I think this will continue, Frank. About the stand your ground law. We won't get into that in this segment. That can be an entirely separate segment. But however, I think what a lot of people don't realize is, the stand your ground law wasn't invoked. George Zimmerman invoked a defense of self-defense, and that was exactly how it played out in court. I think Mr. Bernie De La Ronda, Angela Corey's office, I think they perhaps are grasping at straws, and really, I don't think they really believe they had a case. But this goes back to your point, Frank. There was a lot of pressure on them by Mr. Crump, Miss Natalie Jackson, the NAACP, and various other groups, the Al Sharptons,
Jason, if you connect the dots, letter Jewelson, Crump, letter DOJ, Sharpton, Jackson, and then 44 days later, we got an arrest. Go figure that one out. I mean, what, really? You know,
Well, I still don't know where the probable cause was.
there was
you
no
have to have,
probable cause. There was no, that's your Fourth Amendment, man.
And whether people like it or
cause.
not, it's the Florida state law that the jurors had to go by, and that
it's your
made it legal.
constitutional right. It's a Fourth Amendment, okay? Illegal, whatever the Fourth Amendment. I'm not.
Search and seizure.
I don't have it in front of me. Search and seizure. It has all to do with your rights as a citizen of this country. It's not just Florida. It's all across this country. Have there been cases where, there was no... Well, let me ask you this. What would it have taken for the chief of police and the state attorney to say, you know what, let's just go ahead and charge them and let them hammer it out in court? What do you think? I mean, really? Come on. Really? Go hammer it out in court. We wash our hands. Pontius Pilate, we wash our hands of them, okay?
Well, the way the law works, Frank, and we're familiar with the law here. A prosecutor's duty is only to charge a defendant for what they feel they can convict them of, and we're not sure that was the case, in this trial. And recently, this is really taking a 180 here, but recently in the Andrea Snyderman trial out of Georgia, DeKalb County, Georgia, the prosecutor there, Mr. James, chose to drop the murder charges because he didn't feel he could prove it in court. Unfortunately, Angela Corey's office chose not to do the same and cost Florida taxpayers a lot of money in the process of trying George Zimmerman.
Look at the players. Look at the players in Snyderman. Look at the players here. There was no interest in that, other than the fact that HLN tried to pump it up, that this was going to be the third biggest trial of the year or whatever it was, and that fell through the floorboard, and they had all these shows lined up, and, they were probably sitting there scratching their head, what do we do next? Well, let's go talk about a roller coaster. Really? Or beat up this guy, this poor kid up in Kentucky who, killed his stepbrother. And if I may voice my opinion on that, I believe that the dad did it and that it was all set up. And, they're just beating that thing to death, man. I mean, you got white on white. There's no black or other minority involved. So, it's not really polarizing, to say the least, other than the fact that the dad was, a degenerate, and his son just followed the dad's rules.
Okay, let's move on here, Frank.
I want to talk about HLN needs to change their format. I mean, 4 hours getting beaten up by Andrea Snyderman. That's enough. Switch it up. Throw something fresh in there. Put me and Nancy on, man. We'll talk about anything.
Actually, Frank, I want to ask you. Now everybody knows Nancy Grace, and for those who don't, you can get a complete biography of her on the Occupy website. Frank, we're going to post your Frank Taaffe public figure link on the Occupy website so people can get to it. OccupyHLN.org. You're going to see a link on the homepage to Frank Taaffe's site.
And starting next week, I got T-shirts for sale. It has my picture on the front. On the back, it says, Taaffe's got my back. How about that?
That is cool. That is very cool.
I think a lot of people who out there, Frank, who have been accused of something would like a friend like you on their side. There's no question about that. Let me ask you something, Frank.
I'm not to say.
Go ahead. I'm not.
I would like a neighbor like you. I really would.
Well, they're out there. Hey, Lisa, they're out there. All they got to do is, put on, take the diapers off and put on your big boy pants and get out there and start helping somebody. Get off the couch, put the Doritos down in the six-pack, and let's get in here. Let's get this thing done, man, because we're getting rolled over. George was rolled over. They tried to roll over.
How is he doing now? How is he now?
Well, he's out. Last I heard, when supposedly he was out in Texas and he got a speeding ticket, and he got a warning. And I understand that the city of Forney is now trying to have a disciplinary hearing review on that officer who stopped him because he took a picture of George with him. And, once again, they're digging, they're drilling, and, this has got to stop, man. It's got to stop sometime because, you know what? There's going to be another George Zimmerman out there in this country that they're going to attach themselves to, and we're going to be right back in the same boat.
Elaborating on that point, Frank, yeah, we have video on the Occupy YouTube page. Go to the website, find our YouTube link at the top or the bottom of the page, we have video of when George was pulled over for speeding. Have you talked to Robert, that is George's brother, for those who don't know? Have you talked to Robert? Have you talked to George? Have you been in touch with him? We know this, and this is interesting. He was packing heat, folks. He did have a gun in his glove box, and he informed the officer right away.
Yeah, but he had the right to carry that weapon. There's reciprocal agreements because he still had his permit in Texas. So there was no violation of any gun laws out there.
And he's not been convicted of a crime, we might add.
He hasn't been convicted of any crime. He's been adjudicated not guilty by a jury of his peers.
Do you know how, I don't know what you can tell us and what you can't tell us, Frank, for his own protection. Obviously, he's, a well-known figure now. Do you know how Frank is doing how George is doing every day? How he's living?
Day to day, no. But I will tell you this, when I spoke with Mr. O'Mara, he said he's flying under the radar, and hopefully, my thoughts today is hopefully he's flying low under the radar gun.
Yeah. Who said it? I think it was, who was that guy saying, I can't drive 55?
Ted Nugent.
Sammy Hagar.
Sammy Hagar.
Oh, Sammy Hagar, yeah. I love them both.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to tell.
But let me
George
ask you this. I have to take my hat off to that group of individuals that went after George. There were celebrities that jumped out there. There were well-known other members of Congress that jumped out there, and yet nobody on our side, not a single celebrity jumped out there. Not a single member of Congress jumped out there to say this is wrong and we should never let this happen again, that this man was innocent. And still today, they're still trying to crucify him. And they're not going to be happy until they see something bad happen to my friend George. And that's what I'm afraid of. That's my biggest trepidation and fear. They're not going to be happy.
It would help. Is George going to get plastic surgery, and do you think he should change his identity?
Well, no, and I share with his brother that you need to tell George he needs to get into the gym, get a tan, and do a lot of cardio, and lay off the sweets. He has a passion for sweets. He loves his sweets.
Well, that's okay. You live once. Enjoy them, but,
what else are you going to do when
moderation.
you're sitting in the house and all day long? You're going to eat.
Well, Frank, I'd like to elaborate on that, until something bad happens to George, and then let me explain. Obviously, you're thinking one thing, vigilante, justice, if you want to call it that, justice for a man who was found not guilty, that is, he was exonerated.
He's a marked man. They get death threats every day. The Zimmerman family gets posted death threats every day. Why? Because he wasn't found guilty? Is that what that would have been the biggest travesty of justice.
Yeah, and that's going to be pretty scary to get threats like that all the time.
But let me ask you this, Frank. What do you think? And again, this is an exercise in futility for our listeners. This is not going to happen, but I want to get Frank's opinion on this. What do you think about Mr. Eric Holder in the Justice Department, perhaps potentially chasing down some civil rights violation charges, some federal civil rights, which has been talked about in the media, but it's not going to happen?
I personally have a lot of fear for it, because if they're able to arrest him on some trumped-up charges, the state could do it. How much more can the feds do it?
Yeah,
I don't think they can.
It's a scary thought.
No. You don't hear me. I mean, this, Sacco and Vanzetti, a couple of Italian immigrants. Look at the law. There's been cases throughout history where the feds have jumped in there and, just to appease the black community, they're going to hone in on. They're going to parse and dissect every little thing. And guess what? They can come up with anything they want. They're the federal government, man. Sure, we'll say, oh, well, that ain't right. Well, we've already been through this rendition. We've already seen this happen, played out, a la in the Seminole County Courthouse. It would be nothing for them to hang a charge on them. Nothing.
I don't see that happening, Frank. But
I didn't see the arrest happening. I didn't see the arrest happening, Jason. But yet it happened.
Yeah. So
it's
a real fear. Let's hope it doesn't happen. But it's a real fear.
Well, these are politicians, and they want to placate. They want to placate their constituents.
It's the administration that's the Sharptons are going to bend his ear, jump Holder, and Holder's going to say, come up with something, guys. He must have over 100 attorneys looking at this thing.
Now, do you get threats, Frank?
Do I what?
Do you
Good
get
question.
any threats? Do people bother you at all for sticking up for George?
Of course they do. But, I mean, I'm not trying to, downplay that. But you know what? It is what it is, man, for right now. It is what it is for right now. I'll take all the hits for him. I told him I'll take a bullet for you, man. I'll take a bullet for you.
You've mentioned that on air, too.
You know what? These
Frank,
kids, they're the same age as my children, that my boys would have been, Robert and George, respectively. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I became very, very involved, and I, like a good father, would be there to protect all my children. I didn't have a chance. I tried to with my other ones, but unfortunately, they passed away. But I was not, on the night of the verdict, I went to a quiet room, and I sat there, and I prayed to God. I said, please don't let the boy from me. I came
Frank,
downstairs, and I started a not guilty verdict, and I was elated. And I thank God.
Were you in touch?
And, I didn't want to bring up your sons or put you on the spot that way, but do you feel in some ways like you're that father figure to George and Robert?
I was not going to fail them.
You're a good friend. You're a very good friend.
Frank, were you in touch with George throughout the trial? I mean, personally, did you talk to him? Did you hang out with him?
No, I spoke. We had communication through his brother. That was it. Because of the fact that I was a witness in the case, I did not want to violate anything by having any contact with him. I was the one that chose not to have contact with him.
Because you were under subpoena?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, also, being on HLN and doing all the TV shows, and I think you were a better voice for George that way, and than you could be probably just talking to him. You know what I'm saying? You did better for him by speaking about him.
Well, some of the issues I spoke for myself, other than the fact that he was innocent. I was not going to let the state of Florida take him. I was not going to. I swore that I wasn't going to. We're not going to take him down.
Frank, and that's commendable. Frank, let me ask you this: we all know the on-air personas of, let's say, a Nancy Grace, a Dr. David Drew Pinsky, a Vinnie Politan, a Jane Velez Mitchell. Tell us about Nancy Grace off camera. What can you tell us about her?
I think she's a very articulate and intelligent woman, to be honest with you, because she couldn't have risen to the level of success that she's at today. And I can't say anything. Of course, we had our on-air, banters or whatever you want to call them, segments. But I believe that in her heart and that she knew what the truth was from the beginning.
So she played it up for her ratings the other way. I
think the ratings were a byproduct of the fact that I was an opposing voice and she had to take up for the other side. And albeit
most people don't really try to stick up to themselves to her, but you did. You spoke out no matter who it was. You didn't change your way for anyone.
No, the only person, Vinny, I consider a friend of mine. Jane, I love to death. I love Jane. I even love Nancy, and she said she liked me in a kind of strange way one time on the air. I don't know what that strange way is, but
hey, Frank,
Drew, go ahead.
Frank, if you have a second, can we take a caller from a listener? Can we take a call? If you can answer a question from a listener.
Go ahead.
Listener 248, you're on air. You're on Occupy Live. Are you there?
Jason.
Yes.
I'm from your hometown.
Well, welcome. How you doing, fellow Detroiter?
Good. Yes. Actually, fellow Livonian.
Oh, well, specific hometown. What's on your mind today?
I got a comment. I mean, back when
I'm sorry, what's your
when
name?
we were Todd.
Todd. Okay. What's on your mind, Todd?
I was just making a comment. I mean, back when we were growing up, if something, if we faced, if something was coming, if somebody was coming behind us, wouldn't first reaction be to find out and then start swinging? I mean, isn't that that's defense right there? Because I remember many a times people coming behind me, and my first reaction is start swinging.
Well, I think that depends on the situation.
Yeah. Oh, I know. But
No, I think I know where that caller's coming from. He's trying to say that if George was surveilling him, and that night, he would have been the attacker, and not ask any questions, because he would have felt that maybe he was being aggressed upon. But no, that's not the truth of what happened that night. It was dark. George was on his way back to the truck. Okay, Trayvon had 4 minutes to get home. He had 4 minutes, and I've crawled that distance from where the crime took place, wherever the place, wherever he got shot, to the back of his house, and it's less than 110 yards. Okay, and this kid was 17 years old. He could have ran back and forth 20 times in that 4 minutes. Okay, no, that didn't happen. George was ambushed. He was jumped out and ambushed.
And that's how the testimony played out. Thanks for calling in, Todd. You have any other questions, Todd?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for calling in. Yeah, Frank. Well, digressing back to what we were talking about, you expressed how you thought Nancy was off camera. How were you treated by Vinnie Politan off camera?
Vinnie was a perfect gentleman to me, professional. On the air, he had to go into that role, okay? And, it's like, are you the same guy I just talked to over here? So, my defenses went up, and, because he was on the offense, and, I had to go into defensive mode.
Interesting.
It's only natural to defend yourself and to defend what you believe.
Yeah, of
so
course.
they're two different personalities, off camera and on camera.
Absolutely.
What?
But he still
was Jane Velez Mitchell the same?
Jane was stable throughout. She maintained her professionalism throughout, on and off camera.
How about Jenny Hutt? I always felt like she attacked you, or she would say,
Who?
Frank, you're a likable guy, but Dr. Drew's co-host, Jenny Hutt.
Did you say
yeah.
Jabba the Hutt? Did you say Jabba the Hutt or Jenny the Hutt?
Jenny the Hutt.
I thought you said Jabba the Hutt. Oh, Jenny Hutt, yeah. Well,
from Long Island, New York.
Yeah, with her beautiful manicure that she always has to throw her hands up showing her manicure to the rest of America. She's biased. I just shut her down. Just shut her down because she just wanted to spew out whatever inaccuracies that she knew about the case. She didn't know Hutt about the case.
No, and she does have a law degree, but I want to make this clear to our viewers that she has never practiced a day of law in her life. She went straight to acting school and followed her father's footsteps, and into the music industry.
That's another good question. I'm self-employed, and I did all these shows. I never got a dime. The best thing I ever got was maybe a trip to New York, a trip to Atlanta, a couple of sandwiches, and a cab ride. I'm wondering how a lot of these talking head attorneys are ever in court. Would you want them as your lawyer? If they're always on TV, when the hell are they looking at cases? Makes you want to go, things that make you go,
Well, Jane Velez Mitchell is not a lawyer. She has no law background. Nancy Grace did prosecute 9 years in Georgia, 3 prosecutorial misconduct violations in 9 years. By comparison, most lawyers have 0 in 23 years, 20 or 30 years. Yeah, Jenny Hutt is, we have a gallery of all her looks of consternation and how she gave you. Let me ask you this, Frank. When you're in one of those little boxes on HLN, you're looking at one of those 4 or 5 boxes on, say, Pinsky's Behavior Bureau or whatever he's calling it these days. Can you see the others? Can you see Jenny Hutt and Pinsky and all these other people?
No, I just look at the shows there. To be honest with you, I don't even look at my own shows. after I'm done with them. You can ask my close friends, like, hey, what are you doing? Come on, you're on TV. I'm like, nah, I already know what I'm going to say.
Yeah, you already know what you said. You're sticking to it, and you don't have to go back and look.
Yeah, but Jenny Hutt needs to get a new life, man. She needs to get off. I don't even. She says she's on Sirius Radio or XM or something like that. I don't know.
She is.
They need to. Yeah. They need to have me on Sirius Radio, okay? And then we'll get this thing really moving.
Well, maybe we can work on that.
Getting the Frank Taaffe show.
Yeah, it's called Bulletproof Vest, or keeping it frankly speaking.
Have you ever met Janine Driver? You know, HLN's quote unquote body language expert.
No.
No. You know, Janine Driver will sit there and examine the body language, and whoever is being accused at the time, for instance, George Zimmerman in this trial, she'll say how his body language proves he's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Thankfully, our Constitution doesn't work like that with the Janine Drivers of the world.
She calls herself the human lie detector.
That's
yeah, and I'm sure she got paid for that too, where I didn't.
I think you're a good friend to George. I do. I really do.
Thank you so much,
Lisa. Do you know, through Robert or through George himself or through anybody in the Zimmerman family, if currently in Texas right now George has some type, you know, there's new Black Panther threats, there's bounties, there's crazy people out there. Do you know if he has a security detail of some type?
If I did, I couldn't tell you. I'd have to kill you. No, I don't know.
Well, I might stand my ground. No. What will Frank? What do you see? What do you see? Let's hope this smoke blows over and you know everything goes away as it should. This man was found not guilty beyond a reason. You know, the state couldn't prove he was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, even though Angela Corey went on an interview and called him a murderer afterwards, which Occupy reported
to the. She's mad because a house fell on her sister. Okay.
Yeah. Well, we reported her to.
Hey, Wizard of Oz. Remember the Wicked Witch of the West? She got mad because. Okay. All right, keep going.
We reported her to the Florida the JQC, the Florida Judicial Qualifications Commission, after she made that statement. I don't think that's appropriate behavior for her office. But what do you see, assuming this smoke blows away, what do you see for George's future? I mean, does he want to get back to work and resume a normal life somehow, some way?
That's not going to happen, man. That's maybe in the land of Oz, but not here. Okay, that's not going to happen. Because wherever he goes, whatever he does, his life has been changed for all eternity.
And I'm sure he himself is not happy. It's got to, no matter what, even though he knows he was defending himself, it's got to weigh on him that somebody is dead because of something that happened with him. You know, regardless of charges of law, it's just got to be something that's very hard to deal with.
Well, you got to look at yourself. How many 28-year-olds are put in that position? And, he, because of his family and the closeness of his family, that they were able to endure and overcome, and hopefully, they'll have attain some sort of peace that every American is entitled to, that goes through the judicial system, and a not guilty verdict was rendered. And you just need to just take a moment and understand why we're a democracy and not a dictatorship, even though those believe that Obama is the new dictatorship. And, we have to live under those laws, but we still have laws to protect all Americans.
We got a few minutes left here, Frank.
Hey, and if you got a problem, why don't you get out? Hey, here's a simple solution. Hey, if you don't like the way things are working, get out and vote.
There's an idea.
Stand up for what you believe in.
Get out and vote. Having other people make these laws up for you. You can change them. That's why we live in a democracy. It's called a democracy for a reason. It's of the people and for the people.
Yes, and Occupy, we like to always, make sure that the trial by media stuff, we try to take away from that. We try to, let people watch things and see things for what they are, not what the media is saying. Because a lot of people just watch HLN and they think that that is a news station. They believe whatever the TV tells them. And, they follow that lynch mob mentality.
I guess they got to go to reality when I was on there.
Oh, I think they got a reality check, okay.
Yeah, I think, and they, I was labeled a racist bully and, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Is that all you got? Okay. All right. What's next?
Yeah, you have to have thick skin,
Frank, what do you think about the HLNs, the Mother Joneses, the Huffington Posts of the world who go out there and call George Zimmerman a wannabe cop or a vigilante?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I just got a call from Mother Jones yesterday from some reporters that wanted. I gave an interview to Save White People this past Sunday. It's on a podcast, and they called me up and they wanted to interview me about the interview I gave on Save White People. And first of all, I said, well, she said, we deem that as very inflammatory. I said, not to me. And I said, who are you with again? And then I found out Mother Jones and David Korn and, the Obama media outlet, MSNBC. And I said, no. I said, no, I don't think that's happening. And I cessated that interview yesterday real quick.
Really? How did that end?
With a hang up of the phone.
Well, if someone's not going to let you finish your sentence, if someone's going to cut you off and, make you out to be something you're not, what is the point of talking to them? You're not going to get anywhere.
Well, I learned very early on in my new career now that be careful what you say to print media because they'll twist and turn. I gave an interview to the New York Times early on, and they had asked me about hoodies and, what kind of perpetrators I had seen in our neighborhood. I said, well, they wore baggy pants and wore hoodies and da-da-da-da-da. And then they printed that my quote was that the young black males were Trayvon-like dudes. And I'm like, really? So, I learned real quick. My learning curve went way up.
Yeah. And, as Lisa said, I said, nobody is celebrating the fact what happened. But I think the courts have spoken. Let me ask you this, Frank. What do you think? What are your opinions? I know what Occupy's opinions are. We have not hit our opinions. We thought that Judge Deborah S. Nelson was really ruled mostly in favor of the prosecution. Do you feel she was biased?
Yeah, well, it was a good thing because that left for issues for appeal later on.
Absolutely.
I'm glad she didn't give us anything. You have to look at the cause for appeal, or she had given us more than we should have had. But I'm glad she ruled with an iron fist and didn't give us anything, which left less on the table for appellate issues later on. So yeah. Okay.
Yes, you have to look at the big picture.
Well, okay, let's just wrap it up with a few quick questions, a few random questions, Lisa, if you have any. One little myth out there, which I think is a myth, but I'll let Frank clear this up. A lot of people think that why this is relevant, I don't know, but it's being inundated throughout social media and all places. Can you tell us, was George Zimmerman Jewish?
No, he was Catholic. He was an altar boy. He was Catholic. His father was Catholic. His mother was Catholic. They were Catholics. They were practicing Catholics.
Gotcha. A lot of people have said, boy, how can, have called him a Jewish person. And this is not paraphrasing. This is verbatim,
Listen,
a Hispanic Jew.
I'm surprised they didn't label him as the third shooter in the Kennedy assassination. I mean, he wasn't even born then. But, they're still spinning about that one. So, it's like 5-1, 5-1. One holdout for manslaughter, and then 3 days later, the juror goes on there. it's 5-1, one held out for manslaughter. I'm like, okay, thank you. Lotto numbers. Where are the lotto numbers?
And we believe that to be juror B29, who has since come out and said she wanted to convict George Zimmerman, but lawfully couldn't do so.
Yeah, well, you know, she's a mother of 8. She's a CNA making $10 an hour, and I'm almost certain that ABC threw some De Niro after her, and I don't mean Robert De Niro either.
I think
you got a lot
mother,
of one-liners,
I think when
Frank.
you're a mother, you know, it's that mother instinct. You don't want to know, you don't want to hear that someone has died. You don't want to know that your kid died, someone else's kid died. It's something, you know, I was worried with having all the female jurors that where their mothers, were they going to convict on emotion?
No, I think women are more practical than men. They're more pragmatic, and, you know, you got to understand that what if it was your child that, you know, you also have to flip the coin. What if it was your child that was getting beaten up and he was going to die, and you'd have to, you know, and another thing about it, and let me go back to Angela Corey. When the night she went out and she said that George Zimmerman was in custody or they had a capias for him, you know, and then she said that she said on national TV, and I even prayed with Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin today, and I'm like, well, would she have prayed with the Zimmerman family if Trayvon had completed the bashing of his head and rendered him dead? You know, right there, it stunk right from the beginning, man. It stunk.
Yes, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy all around. No one thinks it's funny. No one, you know, but it shouldn't have been about race. It just should have followed the law, and the law did what it was supposed to. You know,
well,
found him not guilty.
Sabrina Fulton went on early on and said this ain't a black and white thing, it's a right or wrong thing. Then all of a sudden it's a black and white thing. Okay?
Because the right didn't go her way. Hey, Frank, obviously, I can tell you where Occupy stands in this, and I want to ask where you stand on this. Now, for those who don't know, for listeners who don't know, Frank knows about this. Now, early on, this is, you know, way long time ago. There's a station out there, you might have heard of them. They're called NBC, and they had a 911 tape of George Zimmerman, which was doctored to really bring race to the table and make George Zimmerman out to be a racist. And they cut certain parts of the tape out. They left certain parts of the tape in. It was really sneaky editing. I can think of 3 right off the top of my head, and we're going to write about them too in Occupy. Anyways, Frank, I want to get your opinion on this. We know that I believe Mr. O'Mara, it might be another attorney, and perhaps Don West, but we know that George is filing a lawsuit against NBC. Can you take us through that?
The only thing I know is that, yeah, that is correct. NBC went out and edited the 911 tapes, and the fact that I believe there was a suit filed against NBC, which I think George will prevail.
Yes,
well, I really hope he does.
They should not be able to play an edited version of it. They should not be able to do that and get away with it.
You know, you got to look at once again, it's all about this word, ratings. Ratings pay the bills and salaries. It's
and
ratings,
the United
ratings.
And the United States is one of the few developed democracies that doesn't have any governing laws that hold these media outlets to any sort of ethical standards. As close as we come is SPJ.org, Society of Professional Journalists, and HLN is the top dog when it comes to trials and legal news, and other, as Brian Seltzer of the New York Times has pointed out.
Yeah, but Jason, let me ask you this: HLN, man, is dry. I mean, what regular person that comes home from work wants to know about a trial, and you got 5 lawyers? 5 lawyers. Yeah. To the average person that comes home, the average working man in this country and family, we don't need 5 lawyers talking all their BS about what they believe in the trial. I personally don't like lawyers, okay? I want people like me out there giving the rendition from the street level, not sitting on top of some pedestal talking down to the rest of the country. And that's the way I felt that I should have portrayed myself in this case. And you know what? It worked.
It did.
Yes, well, I think you spoke, like you said, from your heart. You were truthful. You stayed true to yourself. You stayed true to your beliefs.
Well, I could do that in any case, given the right circumstances. But, the rest of America needs to know that, too. Get out there and stand up for your friend, man. You know what? It's biblical. No greater reward than it is to lay down your life for a neighbor or your friend or somebody else. Get out there, man. Do it.
It feels good to help someone.
Yeah. Well, and going back to what we said earlier, Frank, I think you were the strongest advocate that George could have had as a friend, and to take on the trial by media lynch mob is no small task. You were castrated in the media. You were called all kinds of names. HLN called you a racist. Miss Ali called you a racist. And you were basically, ostracized by a large enclave of our, demographic, and that's really unfortunate, because all you were doing is sticking up for a friend and sticking up for due process. So I want to commend you for that. But Lisa, are you here?
I'm still here. Did something happen?
Yeah, it appears George. I'm sorry. It appears Frank lost his connection, but that's about all time we have anyway. So it was apropos, if you will. Any wrap-up thoughts you want to have?
No, I think we had a great interview. I think that people can learn a lot from hearing this side of Frank, not the side the media portrays.
Absolutely, Lisa. And it was, to me at least, it was kind of neat, really, to get a peek inside, of the evil empire. Let's face it, HLN. Get a peek inside how they operate. I thought it was interesting how their personalities change from off camera to on camera.
Yeah, I think Frank is a likable guy. I think he's a good friend. I thank him for interviewing with Occupy.
And likewise. And so, for our listeners, you can go momentarily. We'll put it up there this afternoon. We're going to put a link to Frank Taaffe's public figure page on Facebook, and we believe he's going to have a website coming out shortly where he will be selling T-shirts. And Frank, we would like to thank you for being on the show. We understand you got cut off. And again, any other wrap-up thoughts?
No, that's it. Thank you, Jason.
Well, yeah, thank you. And thank you, listeners, for listening in. Hopefully that you gained some sort of, a different perspective on things. And
yeah.
And I think, like you intimated a second ago, I think it's really interesting to hear, Frank being monitored, his mic being controlled by HLN, the raw and uncut version, how we'd like it here in Occupy.
Yes, we want people to be themselves and speak the way they want and not be able to cut them off, let them finish.
Well, okay, Lisa, that's all. Viewers, I want to thank you for listening. This was a long interview. We do plan on having Mr. Taaffe back for another interview, for a follow-up interview, so stay tuned. In the meantime, we will take this entire archived chat we just had. We're going to put it on the OccupyHLN.org website. So make sure you go to OccupyHLN.org, and like I said earlier, we're going to put a link to Frank Taaffe's public figure page, and I'm sure Frank would like you to like that page, as a Facebook term, like that page. And we really appreciate his time. Lisa, I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jason, and I thank Frank too.
Okay. Well, listeners, that will wrap it up for this session of Occupy Live Chat. We thank you for listening in. Without you, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing, and we need you listeners. And tune in to our OccupyHLN.org website for not just more coverage of HLN, but coverage of current trials, media bias, and really a support of due process, which includes the presumption of innocence the right for the accused to put forth a defense without being saying they're trashing the victim. Prosecutors and judges playing by the rules. That's what we stand for against tribal media here at OccupyHLN. And thank you all for listening. Till next time.